Hello, my name is Emma, and today I am going to teach you how to learn irregular past tense verbs. So I'm going to teach you some easy methods and tips on how to do this. So first of all, let's talk about what is an irregular past tense verb. Well, I have here two sentences. The first one says, yesterday, I wanted to travel. The second sentence says, yesterday, I ate the cake. So in English, when we're talking about the past tense, so something that happened in the past, like yesterday, last month, last year, we need to do something to the verb. So most verbs follow this ed rule, which you might have learned before. Learned is an example of this. For many verbs, we add ed to the end to make it a past tense verb. But not all verbs follow this, unfortunately, in English. We have these things called irregular verbs. Irregular verbs are verbs like ate. We don't say he eated the cake. That would make things really easy, but unfortunately, English is not the easiest language. Those of you learning probably know this. So you might think, why do we sometimes use ed? And why do we sometimes have these verbs that are irregular, like ate? Well, the reason, so we have this, why, Emma? And we have this sad face. The reason English is so complicated, it's not because I created the language. It's because the old parts of English have these irregular verbs. So any verb that's extremely old from the beginning or the early days of English, they're the irregular verbs. So for example, spoke is the irregular verb of speak. We already talked about ate, which is the irregular verb of eat. Did is the irregular past tense verb of do. Or sang. That's the irregular past tense of sing. So all of these verbs are very old. Now, the newer verbs in English are the ones that are the easy ones because you just add ed. So for example, decided, visited, wanted. These are all later verbs in English. And even when in English we make new verbs, we usually use the ed. So for example, Googled. I Googled my name. Or even Zoom. A lot of people use Zoom. We've turned it into a verb, zoomed. Yesterday, I Zoomed my sister. So in this video, we're not going to focus on these easy regular verbs. We're going to focus on the hard, irregular verbs. And I'm going to teach you how to learn these verbs. So let's get started. All right, so the first part of my method for learning irregular past tense verbs is to learn the most common ones first. So here are the most common. These are the most commonly used in English. There's many irregular verbs. I recommend you start with the most commonly used ones first and memorize them. You might already know a lot of these already. So, for example, the verb be, here's the present tense, which might be I am, he is, they are. If we're talking about the past, we don't use ed here, it's irregular. We can use was or were. He was, they were. Most of you probably know the be verb. The next one after that is have. Have in the present form becomes has or have. So I have, she has. It depends on the subject. If we're talking about he, they, we, you, it might change the verb. So we have or has. Well, what's the past tense of this verb? It's had. So if I'm talking about last year I had a lot of fun, I could say. So this is an irregular verb. It's irregular because it does not end in ed. It's following a different set of rules. It's an irregular past tense verb. The next most common is do. So here is the present tense, do or does. And the past tense of this is did. Did you have fun last night? Did you go to the concert last week? I did. So we use this for the past tense. The next most common is go. Go in the present tense is go or goes. I go, he goes. In the past tense, it's went. Okay. Say, you probably know say or says. In the past tense becomes said. And you might know all of these already, which is great if you do. The next one is get. In the present tense, it's get or gets. After that, in the past tense, it's got. And then we have make. Here it is in the present tense. Made is the past tense. So you might know all of these already. So if you do, then you learn the next most common irregular verbs, which are think. What's the past tense of think? Thought. I thought so. We have take. Yesterday, I took a test. Feel. What's the past tense of feel? This is a hard one for a lot of people. Felt. I felt that. And then we have leave, which is left. Bring, which is brought. Buy, which is bought. Come, which is came. And eat, which is ate. So these are the most important ones to learn. If you don't know any of these, learn them first. But once you learn these, you can also Google, hey Google, what's the 20 most common irregular verbs? Or you can Google, what's the 30 most common irregular verbs? So this is a good way to figure out what verbs are the most important to learn first. Now I'm going to teach you how can we memorize this in an easy way. So you know, first, figure out what verbs to look for, the most common. And now let's figure out how to memorize these verbs. All right, so the first tip is learn the most common irregular past tense verbs. Another great tip or method is to learn the common patterns of irregular verbs. When you first learn them, it looks random. Oh, why is there an E here and an I here and an O here? But really, there are patterns for irregular verbs. So I'm going to show you some of those patterns right now. When you learn the patterns, so here I have group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. By learning the common patterns, it can help you memorize these irregular verbs faster. The patterns also have past participles. So there's 3 parts to a pattern. You have the present tense, you have the simple present tense, and then you have the past participle. So I'll explain what a past participle is in a moment when we look at our first group. But my main point is when you're learning the pattern, also learn past participles. You will need to know them when you learn the present perfect tense anyway. So the first group we're going to look at is a pattern where you'll notice the vowel changes. So the present vowel is different than the past tense vowel, which is different from the past participle. So I have here the verb to sing. Sing, you know, la 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 la. Okay, so right now I just sang. A minute ago I sang. So sang is the past tense of sing. Notice what changed was just the second letter here. It went from an I to an A. Now, if I was using the present perfect, I would need what's called a past participle. A past participle is the verb form that we use after have and had with certain grammar tenses, specifically the perfect tense. Or you can also use it with some other tenses too. But notice here, the past participle is sung with a U. So if I was memorizing this, I would think sing, sang, sung, sing, sang, sung, sing, sang, sung. So we have the present, sing, the past, sang, and the past participle, sung. It's also good to memorize the past participles because students often confuse the past tense with the past participle. So they might say, oh, yesterday I sung at karaoke. But no, yesterday means they want to use the past tense, so the correct verb would be sang. So it's good to learn these patterns. Let's look at another example for group 1 when the vowel changes. We have drink. Drink is a very common verb in English. What about the past? Yesterday or last week, last year? We would say drank. And so you see the I becomes an A. Yesterday, I drank some milk. Now, the past participle is actually with a U, just like sung. This time it's drunk. I have drunk horse wine before. I know it's a strange example, but it's true. So you can use this when you have or had. But this is the past tense. Okay, here's another example. Swim, swam, swum. Today, I swim. I swim every Monday. Last week, I swam. I have swum in the Pacific Ocean before. So sing, sang, sung, drink, drank, drunk, swim, swam, swum. These are all the same pattern. We have the I in the present, the A in the past, and the U as the past participle. So many irregular verbs follow this pattern. Now let's look at another pattern we might see, what I call group 2. Group 2 is the best, okay? If you're learning English, you will be happy when you find a group 2 irregular verb. Why? You don't have to do anything. It's all the same. Put. Oh, beautiful. So I can say, if I'm talking about now, the present, I can say, every Tuesday, I put on makeup. Now, if I'm talking about the past, so before, same verb. Last winter, I put on my gloves. And then we also have put for the past participle. I have put, I'm trying to think of a good example for this. I have put makeup on a cat before. That's not true, but just an example. It's a strange example, I'm sorry. But the bottom line is put, all the same. It's the same with set. Set in the present is the same in the past, and it's the same as a past participle. So group 2 is the best. You don't have to do anything. Group 3 is with en. There are a lot of verbs that are irregular where the past participle ends in en. Let's look at some examples. Break. So I hope I don't break my toe. Broke is the past tense. I broke a finger before. I broke last month. I broke my computer. And then we have broken, which is the past participle, and you'll notice it's en. Same with drive. Drive is an important verb. Many people drive. So drive is for the present. Drove is for the past. Last night I drove so far. And then driven is the past participle. So again, when you learn a new irregular verb, think about what group is it in. Now the hardest group is what I call the unique group, where they follow their own rules. So it has less patterns. So for example, go, went, gone, see, saw, seen. Sometimes you'll have some verbs where they don't follow these patterns. They don't follow really any patterns. They have their own pattern. And those are the hardest because you really have to memorize them. Okay, so we've covered some different irregular verbs. I told you learn the most common ones first. Learn the past participle at the same time. So that way you can, really memorize sing, sang, sung, swim, swam, swum, drink, drank, drunk. It's easier when you say all three and memorize it that way. So I've told you about irregular past tense verbs, the past tense verbs that do not use ed. Now there's a lot of them. So how do we memorize these? Well, it's all about practice. I'm going to give you some ideas now on how to practice these words. So one thing many students find helpful is to use flashcards. So a flashcard is where on one side you have the present tense, and then when you flip it, there's the past tense. Flashcards are great because they help you quiz yourself. And remember, the way to really learn something is to test yourself frequently. So maybe you look at it and then a minute later you do it again, and then 5 minutes later you try it again, and you keep doing this day after day. Flashcards are very useful. I'm using them to learn Chinese, and I'm finding my Chinese is really improving this way. So some people like to use paper flashcards. That's great. That's what I do. Other people like to use apps. There's many different apps online. The apps are frequently changing, but you can use a flashcard app as well to practice this. So one of the best ways to learn new words, especially irregular verbs, is to read stories with irregular verbs. So there's now something called ChatGPT. There's also other AI platforms you can use, and they're great for creating stories. And they're really good for creating stories for English learners. So what you can do is you can go to one of these AI sites. So I like to use ChatGPT, but there's many different ones. And you can just ask it, write a story, a short story with irregular past tense verbs, or with verbs in the irregular past tense. And then you'll get a short story with a lot of these verbs. By reading these stories, you see the verbs more, and you see them in the right context or situation. The more you read them, the more familiar they become, and it helps with memorization. So, I love doing this when I learn Chinese. I read Chinese stories all the time, and I ask ChatGPT to write me Chinese stories. You can do the same thing with irregular verbs. Ask AI to write you a short story using an irregular or using irregular English verbs in the past tense. So another thing you can do is create a chart. So here's an example. I've written at the top present tense, and then I have my present tense words. I've written past tense, and I have the past tense form. And then I have the past participle. So I have eat, ate, eaten, buy, bought, do, did, done. Creating a chart like this is really helpful. Think about the most common irregular past tense verbs. Start with those. Create a chart and put it somewhere you will see it a lot. Maybe on your kitchen table. Maybe on your mirror in the bathroom. It's good to put this somewhere where you will see it. And then if you do this every day, you look at it and you just say the words to yourself. Eat, ate, eaten. Buy, bought. Do, did, done. It almost sounds like music when you have the three of these together. So repeating it can really help you remember it. So repeat it often with your voice and read it often. There's a lot of great songs with the irregular past tense. The Beatles, I love. They sing slowly. Their songs are usually simple. You can find a lot of great songs like Yesterday by the Beatles. Listen to it and try to hear the different irregular verbs. You can probably find quite a few in these types of songs. Finally, it's really important to also try to use the irregular past tense in sentences when you are learning them. So I showed you the chart. It's also a good idea to write sentences too. So for example, you can think about your day. What did you do today? I ate breakfast. So ate is an irregular past tense verb. I drove to work. Drove is the past tense of drive. It's a very common irregular verb. I saw my friend. Saw is another example. I made dinner. So as you can see, we use them all the time in our everyday routines. So try to write about your own routine and try to use as many irregular past tense verbs as you can. You can even share things from your routine in the comments section below. Tell me about your day and try to use some irregular past tense verbs. So I want to say truly, I am sorry about English because I know it's hard. There's the regular verbs, there's the irregular verbs. Why can't it just be easy? So I'm sorry English grammar can be complicated, but when you learn something in English, it's amazing. And the good news is irregular verbs, you will hear them again and again and again. So once you memorize them, your English will really improve. And remember, the best way to learn something is to test yourself. So you can visit www.engvid.com and take my test on irregular verbs. Make sure that you memorize these ones and practice using them. You can also subscribe to my channel. I have many different videos on topics related to English, like grammar, pronunciation, listening, writing, and so much more. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.